Good morning. I'm Robert Julian with the Washington, D.C. and Dallas firm of Baker Hostetler. With me today is my co-counsel and lead trial lawyer in our mass tort litigation, Michael Watts from Texas, and my partner, Dustin Dow, and Vadim Medvedev from Ukraine, a Ukrainian lawyer. We're going to discuss today the 5 lawsuits that we filed against American technology companies for allegedly illegally exporting chips and microprocessors and other electronic components that Iran and Russia used to wage war on Ukraine and citizens in the last 4 years. And before I start, I might say that, you know, my firm has been involved in a lot of big cases in the nation. We've recovered $14.8 billion for the Madoff trustee for distribution to defrauded investors across the nation, and $13.5 billion in the PG&E case where I led the tort committee on behalf of 75,000 victims. And my firm considers this case every bit as worthy and significant as recoveries that we've had for the Madoff investors and the PG&E victims. In the last 4 years, folks, Russia has killed or injured thousands and thousands of Ukrainian citizens. They've used thousands of Russian missiles and Iranian drones to do that. Those missiles and drones have been guided and operated by microprocessors and other electronic components produced by, according to our lawsuit, Texas Instruments, AMD, Intel, and Mauser Electronics. And Senator Blumenthal's permanent investigation committee in the Senate a year ago concluded a year-long investigation into the technology company's culpability for what has happened in Ukraine. And I quote Senator Blumenthal when he said and castigated American technology companies for their, quote, knowing neglect or willful ignorance bordering on intentional disregard, close quote. And from his chairman's post in the Senate conference room, he looked down at representatives from Texas Instruments, Intel, and AMD and told them, quote, looking the other way when you know your products continue to empower Russian slaughter is not just morally dubious, it is against the law. We expect more from American companies, close quote. That's Senator Blumenthal after a year-long investigation. And last night, my co-counsel and lead trial lawyer, Michael Watts, returned from a 9-day trip to Ukraine with a full investigative team where he and his team investigated multiple attacks and documented multiple attacks at 5 sites that Michael's going to describe to you today. He visited playgrounds, hospitals, dormitories, apartment buildings, and the devastation is significant. He met many Ukrainian families who lost loved ones and who were injured in the strikes powered by American technology. And the families asked him for help. They asked him to stop the chips, stop the war. And he and my firm have agreed to file lawsuits to address the alleged illegal supply of hardware and technology that has empowered Russia to kill so many civilians and injure so many civilians. This morning, Michael Watts and my firm filed 5 lawsuits in Dallas State Court against these 4 technology companies, and those lawsuits will be served immediately. We filed those lawsuits on behalf of 5 different families with respect to 5 different missile and drone strikes powered by Russian missiles and Iranian drones. I would like Michael to explain his trip, but more today. He's going to first explain to you the 35-year history of American governance and prohibitions on the export of American technology to Iran and to Russia. And then my partner, Dustin Dow, is going to explain to you the allegations in our complaint that establish, in our view, grounds and allegations for liability against the four technology companies. Then Michael's going to come back and explain his trip with his investigative team, what he found, who he met, and why he believes it's important. Before I turn the microphone over to Michael, I'd like to say, as a personal matter, since I've studied this for quite a long time, that there is a strong American interest in this litigation and in stopping the chips from being supplied to Russia and Iran. And that is because over 30 years ago, the Ukrainians agreed to give up their nuclear protections against this exact type of war in exchange for security assurances from America when our president signed the trilateral agreement with the presidents of Russia and Ukraine. That was not a small moment. They gave up their nuclear weapons, and now my firm and Michael's firm are standing behind the families who have not gotten the benefit of the American security assurances because they're being bombed to death. Now I'd like to explain Michael Watts' background. I met him in the PG&E case. He represented a quarter of the 75,000 victims. He recovered over $4 billion for those victims himself. I represented a lot of plaintiff lawyers in that case. I found him to be of the highest standards. And one thing about Michael, he wants to win. He will do whatever is possible. He will go back to Ukraine again and again to make sure we represent the Ukrainian interests to the best of our capability. Michael?
Thank you for coming this morning. I'm Michael Watts from Texas, and the importance of what we're doing really comes down to this. The United States of America has provided $175 billion in security assistance to Ukraine as it attempts to defend itself from Russian aggression. But most of the damage that we're seeing there now is being caused by missiles and drones guided to their targets by American chip technology that is being illegally exported into Russia. It's kind of a boomerang. We throw chips at them and it comes back and hits us in the head, completely negating the value of this $175 billion investment that the American taxpayers make. So we have filed this lawsuit. This is not working. We filed this lawsuit in order to bring pressure on these companies to stop this very lax export process. And what I want to talk about first is this. This regulatory regime designed to restrict bad actors' access to our technology has been around for 35 years. It really began after the Tiananmen Square disaster in 1989, where the Congress restricted China's access to our equipment. It continued in 1990 in the Gulf War with Iraq. In 1992, it was extended to Iran. And it has been functionally illegal to export technology to those three countries for over 35 years. And yet what's happened is that these companies have, in effect, been permitted to put up an internet site, and you can go to chips.com and obtain whatever technology you want as long as you promise you're not Russia. This is the same thing that happened with respect to the Juul crisis, the vaping crisis with minors, where they in effect allowed those minors to order online stuff that they shouldn't have gotten anyway. I like to call this the merchants of death because in effect, through commercial transactions, we have a situation where American companies are making hundreds of millions of dollars selling chips, selling guidance technology to third parties who are rerouting that technology into Russia. That's what we've seen over the last 35 years. We've got a very fulsome history that's in the PowerPoint that I would be showing. Can I get access to it? Thank you. Still not working. For 35 years, this technology has been rerouted to bad corporate actors, to nation states that would do our allies harm. We've seen that with respect to technology that's getting to Russia since the invasion of 2022. Even though the United States has put up all sorts of sanctions, Russia has stepped up its drone attacks. We have been able to list about 37,000 drone and missile attacks that have rained in on the Ukrainian people. I'll talk about our trip a little bit, but the bottom line of the lawsuit is that these companies know their chip technology is making its way into Russia. And I ask the very simple question, if we can put a Find My Friend on our iPhones, certainly we have the technological capability for chip manufacturers to trace where their product is ending up. They are able to do it. You can't just put your head in the sand and pretend that you don't know. The bottom line is that what we're seeing is this technology is ending up in a number of different places. The Shahed 131 drone, the Shahed 136 drone, and you can literally see the American technology chips that are found in these things. So what we did is we went to Ukraine. We actually opened up some of this ordnance, and you can see all of the different chips that come. And they're right there, American chips, inside of this technology. Whether it's the KH-101, whether it's the Ixander-M, whether it's the Shahed 136 or the Shahed 131. What my colleague Jamie Shaw and I learned is that hundreds of these missiles, hundreds of these drones are raining in on Ukrainian civilians every night. I literally still have the app that shows the warnings that come in, and it's repetitive hundreds of times a night. So the bottom line is that since the 1989 timeframe, there's no excuse technologically, there's no excuse legally for this kind of export of military items to be permitted. And they're on the U.S. munitions list. There are executive orders, there's all sorts of legislation, there's all sorts of requirements, and yet somehow we've allowed these technology companies to ship it to third parties, pretend that they don't know what's happening, and they say there's nothing we can do. And over and over and over again, throughout the last 35 years, we see example after example after example of evading these export controls by simply sending the technology to a third party, sticking your head in the sand and pretending that you don't know where it's really going. And that is that we have American companies that are selling to middlemen, primarily in Iran and in China, knowing full well that that technology is making its way to Russia to attack our allies in Ukraine. There have been periodic indictments of individuals, periodic work by various justice departments, but the bottom line is the Iran sanctions law has been made a farce. The sanctions law with respect to Russia has been made a farce. China has made a farce out of this. And the bottom line is that this technology is making its way into Russia and is in the missiles and drones that are killing Ukrainian people. Our friends in the press, particularly PBS, have done a great job chronicling this, getting inside of that, putting this up. And so, Simon, your work has just been outstanding. And a lot of fellow members of the Fourth Estate have done this. And what we've seen is over the last 3 years, over and over and over again, different corporations are being exposed with their chips in these instruments of deaths. And so, without taking you through all this in detail, this is all there. But the bottom line is there's literally no excuse for these companies to say we don't know, because they do know. They know exactly what's happening because of this system of evading export controls by shipping chips to third parties and pretending that those third parties are not going to peddle that to the enemies of the United States, and in this case, to Russia. There is no excuse anymore. The facts are indisputable. These chips are appearing in each and every missile and drone that we're able to get our hands on. And we've literally opened up the boxes, examined the chips while we're in Ukraine, and seeing what all of this press reporting is showing, and that is that Russia has in effect evaded these export controls, taken these American chips, put them into their drones and missiles, and using them as the guidance technology to kill and injure Ukrainian citizens. Again and again and again, members of the media have done a great job showing that hundreds of Western electronic components are being found in these Russian components. So what do? The media has done its job. The media has exposed this farce that American technology companies have hoisted upon the world, that it's okay to export this and then just put your head in the sand and pretend that you don't know that it's happening. Well, of course, the media has shown hundreds of different occasions that they know it's happening. But what are the corporations doing? Are they taking any internal steps to see to it that their products are not being used by the Russians against Ukraine? And the answer is no. And how do we know that? Texas Instruments, for example, had a shareholder meeting where there was a resolution to require the company to see where its chips were going, to be a good corporate citizen, to assist in preventing this from happening. And this was Texas Instruments' response. The board of directors of Texas Instruments recommended against the proposal just to track where these chips have gone. How about a mic right there? We got it working now? This was the response of Texas Instruments.
We're much more than one of the world's leading semiconductor providers.
This isn't entirely surprising. American technology giant Texas Instruments, whose components are turning up in multiple weapons platforms used by Russia, including the missile we saw, voted down a proposal to report internally on misuse of their company's products at its annual shareholders meeting in April.
The board of directors recommends vote against this proposal.
That's Texas Instruments Chairman Rich Templeton. His board of directors recommended to vote against the proposal because of a belief that the company already had a sufficiently robust compliance system in place, and, quote, complete traceability and prevention of product misuse is unachievable.
That's the voice of Simon Ostrowski from PBS NewsHour. Excellent journalism, but the problem with it is it was years ago. And he lifted the veil of ignorance and exposed what's going on, and yet it continues. What we learned in Ukraine is that these chips, even manufactured after the sanctions took place, are continuing to appear in Russian missiles. And so here we are in 2025. We've had 35 years of history of these U.S. companies exporting the means of death and destruction to the enemies of the United States. And yet it continues. And so what I want to talk about next is I want to have my colleague Dustin Dow come up and explain why civil litigation can play an important role to preventing these companies from continuing what they've chosen to continue, even though the media has already exposed them. Dustin?
Thank you, Michael. My name is Dustin Dow with the law firm Baker Hostetler, and I'm leading the liability investigation as part of this litigation against these defendants in this case. And so, as Bob mentioned earlier this morning, we filed the 5 lawsuits in Texas State Court in Dallas County. We call this allied attack. These American companies are providing these chips that the Russian military is using to attack our allies, the Ukrainian civilians. So we have the plaintiffs, of course, are the Ukrainian civilians who are being attacked by the Russian military. They are the plaintiffs in these 5 lawsuits that we filed this morning. They're civilians who were injured. They lost loved ones in these attacks. The defendants, you can see right there, and these are the defendants in the 5 lawsuits filed this morning: Texas Instruments, AMD, Intel, and Mauser Electronics. Now, Mauser Electronics is a Texas-based distributor who takes all of the components from Texas Instruments, AMD, and Intel and facilitates their distribution to Iran, Russia, China, and ultimately to the Russian military, where they are used against the plaintiffs in these cases. So in terms of the case overview, you've got the defendants' microchips. These essential microchips are the key to powering these drones and missiles. They're the things that are guiding the Russian missiles that are being used to attack these plaintiffs, causing death, severe injury, and widespread devastation that Michael's going to talk about later from his trip. So what is the case goal? What are we seeking with these 5 cases that were filed this morning? We are seeking to recover, on behalf of these Ukrainian civilians, the damages that they have suffered from what these defendants are doing, from putting their microchips out into Iran and Russia, where they are being used knowingly against these Ukrainian civilians who have suffered injuries, death, and the loss of loved ones. Now, you mentioned, Bob, at the beginning of this press conference, mentioned Senator Richard Blumenthal. This was a really important statement and investigation that Senator Blumenthal's committee, the Senate Committee on Permanent Investigations, led for more than a year. And in September of 2024, he brought before him representatives from Texas Instruments, AMD, and Intel, the same defendants in this case. And they looked at all of the documentation evidence they had gathered in the course of a year. And what he concluded, and that's quotes right there, is that what these companies were doing were simply turning a blind eye to what everyone knew what was happening. He said, looking the other way when you know your products continue to empower Russian slaughter is not just morally dubious, it is against the law. We expect more from American companies. We absolutely expect more from American companies, and that's what these lawsuits are about. Holding these American companies accountable for what they have done and what they continue to do, which is to put their microchips into the wrong hands without maintaining the internal controls that they know they need to have to prevent this from happening. You heard Bob say it earlier. Stop the chips and you stop the war. They can stop these chips from ending up in the wrong hands. They just choose not to do so. And that's what this lawsuit is about. What we've seen in Ukraine, and Michael's going to detail this later, is simply catastrophic human loss. And it is powered by the American technology that is used in these drones and missiles. Without it, Russia could not be doing what it is doing to the Ukrainian civilians and the plaintiffs in these 5 cases that were filed this morning. So we have 5 attacks. Each of these cases is separated by an attack. The 5 attacks are listed on this slide here, and this entire slide deck is available for you in the press kit. First attack is March 22nd, 2023, Ryshiv, Ukraine. It was an attack by Shahed 131 and Shahed 136 drones. Those are Iranian-produced drones. Iran sources the microchips from the American companies, produces the drones, provides them to the Russian military, which uses the drones to attack the civilians who are the plaintiffs in these cases. They all included Texas Instruments, AMD, Intel components, and of course, Mauser is a key distributor and facilitator of getting those components into the hands of downstream buyers, including, in this case, Iran and the Russian military. April 28th, 2023, Uman, Ukraine. That was an attack by KH-101 cruise missiles. a Russian missile that includes necessarily and essentially the components from these defendants, AMD, Intel, and Texas Instruments, and again, with the help and necessary integration from Mauser's distribution network. June 13, 2023, Kyiv, Ukraine, another attack by KH-101 missiles. July 8, 2024, an attack on a children's hospital in Kyiv, again by a Russian KH-101 missile. We know from the forensic that these missiles include these defendants' components, which necessarily means these defendants did not have the necessary controls to stop these chips from getting into the wrong hands that were ultimately used against these civilians. Finally, April 4, 2025, another attack in Kyiv, this time by an Iskander-M ballistic missile, different type of Russian missile, but nevertheless another one that includes the components that these defendants supply to Iran, Russia, and China. So these drones and missiles that we talked about, they absolutely depend on the technology, the American chip technology. It is not available elsewhere. In order for Russia to attack the Ukrainian civilians with the drones and missiles, they have to be able to source the chips that these defendants produce and that Mauser Electronics, who's also a defendant, funnels to Iran and Russia. Without the chips, Russia cannot wage this war against these civilians and these plaintiffs. Again, Mauser, of course, is a key distributor. They are based in Texas, and the customs data that we have reviewed shows that Mauser has been sending this technology directly into Russia. The forensic examinations have been conducted by non-governmental and governmental agencies in Ukraine. They confirm that these Russian weapons, including you see there the KH-101, that's the missile, the Shahed-131 and 136 drones, they repeatedly show that these defendants' components are on these weapons that are being used to wage war against these civilians who are the plaintiffs in these 5 cases. These defendants knew that this diversion of their products was going on, and yet they have done nothing to stop it. They have the controls could be in place to stop these chips from getting into the wrong hands. They simply have chosen not to act on those potential controls because, quite frankly, they make money selling the products. As Richard Blumenthal stated, they're simply turning a blind eye to what's happening with their products. You're going to see in these lawsuits, we talk about field programmable gate arrays, FPGAs. Those are the type of chips that these defendants sell and manufacture and put into the marketplace that enable the end user to manipulate the chip to do whatever it wants it to do, to guide and provide navigational controls for these missiles and drones. They are incredibly powerful chips that in the wrong hands, in the hands of Iran or Russia, are deadly instruments because they can be programmed to provide the navigational support for these drones and missiles to be used as long-range remote attack devices to attack and kill civilians. The Shahed-136 drone is one of the foremost drones. Again, this is produced by Iran and provided to the Russian military to attack the civilians. You can see listed here are all the components from these defendants that have turned up in these drones. Components that these defendants simply have not put controls in to stop from getting into the wrong hands. KH-101 missiles, same deal. Literally, photos of these defendant components that are found in these missiles after they strike the plaintiffs and civilians in Ukraine. Iskander-M missiles, this is a special one. So an Iskander missile is a ballistic missile, meaning it shoots up like an arc like this and then comes down on its attack site, and it sends out cluster munitions. It is incredibly devastating, and it is made possible only because it has the chip support from these defendants who did nothing to stop their chips from getting into the hands of the Russian military. And that's what these lawsuits are about. These U.S. lawsuits are about these defendants who had a duty to ensure that the dangerous and deadly products that they produce did not get into the wrong hands where they could be used to kill civilians. There are many U.S. laws on the books and regulations that require these defendants to do their due diligence to make sure when they sell a product, it is not getting into the hands for military end use and a military end user. That's what the regulations are designed to prevent. That's what these defendants ignored. Time and time again. And there is a long history of U.S. export controls that are designed to prevent exactly what is going on in Ukraine right now with these defendants' chips that are arming the Russian military. Simply, they have chosen to maximize profit ahead of and in favor of their duties to protect the plaintiffs and civilians who are simply devastated by what's gone on in Ukraine. And the defendants, quite frankly, have admitted that, yes, their chips have gotten into the wrong hands. Quite frankly, they have to admit it, because it is abundantly obvious by the forensics examinations that have occurred in Ukraine. And again, Senator Blumenthal, the illicit flood of semiconductors into Russia is enabled by the knowing neglect or willful ignorance of American companies. It borders on intentional disregard. Quite frankly, it is intentional disregard. Simply is a laissez-faire attitude toward compliance with the export controls that are, again, specifically designed to prevent what is happening in Ukraine from happening. But the defendants have chosen to ignore those controls. And that is the corporate negligence by these defendants. Failures in their U.S.-based and Texas-connected export control, sanctions compliance, distributor screening, and diversion prevention systems that has led to the damage for these plaintiffs. And you can see right there, the specific failures by these defendants are simply devastating to the plaintiffs in these cases. With that, I'll turn it back to Michael to talk about what he found in Ukraine.
I want to visit with you about our investigation over the last 9 days, and the topic for this portion of the PowerPoint is the damage done to Ukraine. I spent about 5 years of my legal career recently working on the opioids epidemic here in the United States. And about 840,000 Americans have lost their lives towards opioid overdose deaths and the like. And our lawsuits and lots of other good lawyers getting together recovered over $58 billion in settlements from those who manufactured opioids, those who purveyed them or distributed them. This is very similar from the standpoint of Purdue Pharmaceuticals and Mallinckrodt, who produced the opioids, got sued, both ended up in bankruptcy court. The corollary of those manufacturers of these chips would be Texas Instruments, Advanced Micro Devices, and Intel, as well as analog devices as well. The distributors in the opioids epidemic were Cardinal Health, AmerisourceBergen, and McKesson, who had to pay $26 billion to settle our lawsuits with respect to their responsibility for wrongfully distributing that product. The corollary here is Mouser Electronics. They are the distributor who has substantial liability for distributing products in violation of U.S. law. And so we'll be going after not only the manufacturers, but the distributors. And for what end? I want to talk to you about the trip that we just got back from Ukraine. But before I do, We made a short video to kind of explain what we were doing over there, and I'll play that right now.
You know, the Ukraine war is just unbridled brutality by Vladimir Putin and the Russian army. They've come in and they've killed hundreds of thousands of people, committed all sorts of war crimes. They've hit children's hospitals. They've hit elementary schools. They've hit offices. They've hit residential towers that have nothing to do with military applications. These are war crimes. We know which kinds of drones with which kinds of chips, guidance technology were in them. And what we've learned is that there are a number of American companies, some from Texas, most from California, who have been supplying those drone guidance chips, knowing that through Iranian and Chinese middlemen, they would end up in Moscow for use by Vladimir Putin. So what we're doing is we're working with a lot of people who are war crimes prosecutor, investigator types, good people in Ukraine, to hopefully stop the exportation of this critical technology which allows Vladimir Putin to continue to terrorize the Ukrainian people, to kill them, to maim them, to harm them. And if that takes civil litigation in the state of Texas and California, I'm proud to assist in that effort.
I don't think anybody over here in the United States has any idea the level of death and destruction that I'm about to be able to see and document and show the world. So I'm excited about the trip. I'm nervous, but I know it's the right thing to do. So we're on our way. It's gonna be scary. Tomorrow morning, I interview somebody that'll be the first client. We're going to interview doctors and nurses that were in the hospital that was hit. We're going to interview people who were mortally wounded by these drone and missile attacks. The thing that I've learned, I've been in Ukraine for 48 hours, is that this reign of terror has no military objective whatsoever. It's designed to subjugate an entire population, entire people, to get them to quit. We're in the Radisson in Kiev, and then we're all going to end up below the Radisson in Kiev and spend the night in the bomb shelter, because there will be just a night full of missiles sent into Kiev, as there is every night. They had a big bombing 2 days ago on Sunday, where literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of missiles and drones were deposited upon Kiev just to subjugate the people, to terrorize the people. Almost all of the incidents we're going to go to are missiles. Today was a drone incident, but there are missiles that are hitting sides of apartment buildings, and just it's pretty bad. I mean, there are apartment complexes, homes, children's hospitals, warehouses, everything but military sites. They're just getting hit anyway because it's part of a campaign of psychological terror on the civilian population. We're not allowed to say where we are right now. We've got, in effect, rescue packs attached to us that we're required to take, which is basically a tourniquet and blood and this and that. And they said, look, if you have this on you, we may be able to save your leg or your arm and keep you from bleeding out. If you don't have it on you, we can't promise you anything. We're here investigating a bombing or a missile attack on June the 13th of 2023, and a second one on April the 4th of 2025. I spent the evening talking to grieving mothers who literally had to bury their kids because of these disparate missile attacks by Vladimir Putin and the Russian military. I told every one of them there's two purposes of a lawsuit, and that is, number one, to compensate people for what's been done wrong to them, and second is to deter these companies from continuing to deliver this technology in a way that guides these Russian missiles. And to a person, they all said, we don't care about the money, just make the missiles stop. And tell these companies this is not okay, and make them change their way. And that's why we're here. That's why I am in Ukraine in December. Ukraine has a latitude that is north of Winnipeg, Canada. This is not my idea of a fun time. It's cold here. But it's absolutely the right thing to do, to be here to help these people. There are, a couple of million casualties in terms of deaths and injuries here. but they're given as good as they get. These people are not going to give up their freedom. They're not going to give up their land because Donald Trump thinks it's a great idea. These are a proud people, and they deserve our support.
Hence the phrase Slava Ukraini. In 9 days, what we learned was several things. Number one, it's a dangerous place. It's hard to get to. We started in Austin, Texas, and went to Frankfurt, caught a Austrian air flight to Vienna. It was late, so we missed the connection. We were at risk of losing 3 days of our trip, so we had to charter a plane from Vienna to a town that I'm going to mispronounce. It sounds like Susivia, but it's not. And then we drove it across the border into Chernivtsi. There's the passport stamp. And then that next night, we started interviewing people on our way to Kiev. It is a country basically the size of the landmass of Texas. It takes a long time to get across it. Obviously, directionally, the further east you go, the more danger you are at because you're closer to the Russian front. But we went all the way to Kryvyi because we wanted to hit each of these 5 examples. There's thousands of them we could have done, but we wanted to focus on these 5. And then we made our way back to Uman, back to Chernivtsi, back to Romania, and back home. I do want to take a moment to thank our colleagues in Ukraine from the State Capture Accountability Project team, Svetlana Valko, Mariana Kira, Marna Mukina, Emily Patterson, Dmitry I can't even say Dimitri's last name. They were valiant. Dmitry drove us thousands of miles. These young ladies did the translating with us. Svetlana and Emily made sure that this was an efficient trip, and so I congratulate them. The first thing that I learned is there's not much sleep in Ukraine, and that's the purpose of the persistent drone and missile attacks. On the center is my makeshift bed in the internal bathroom. I learned there's 3 kinds of different drone warnings. One of them is you've got a MiG coming your way, you go down into the shelter below the hotel. If you've got a missile coming your way, you go down into the shelter below. If it is a drone, get somewhere interior away from the windows. And so that's what we did, but the shelter down below, one of the occasions where Mr. Shaw and I were not allowed to sleep because these alarms go off. You can see it on my phone. That it's just around the clock alarms. And so that's what we did. Night after night after night, we left hotel rooms to protect ourselves as these things were coming in. And to give you some idea as to the quantum, this is the way people in Ukraine get to spend their evenings. This is 2 floors below the Radisson Hotel. In effect, the parking garage. It is not. There's not power down there. It's run on a generator, so there's no heat. It's very cold. It's very late, and it's not comfortable. But let's focus on the 5 attacks that we focused on. I'll do them in chronological order, not necessarily in the order in which we looked at them. The first one is March the 22nd of 2023. It was a Shahid drone attack on a high school dormitory. The thing I wanted to know was, is there any possible military installation anywhere close to where these were? And the answer is no, not for miles and miles and miles. The lawyer in me said, well, is it possible that perhaps there was just a missed, coordinate, that this was a mistake? When you see them over and over again, you become very aware that there's nothing mistaken about what's happened here. And we'll go through those 5. The bottom line is the location of this first one. We are very much in Eastern Europe, above the latitude of Winnipeg, Canada, just outside of Kiev in a town called Rishiev. And this was a drone attack that killed 6 people who were doing nothing more than going to school or running the dormitory for students. And you can see on the left, this happens in the night. There were 2 different drone attacks. And at the end of this video, you'll see the second one come in and the devastation that these drones can cause. And you can hear them. And that was Vladimir Putin blowing up a high school dormitory. This is the devastation that's caused by these drones. And that devastation is caused, in this case, by two different Shaheeds. It's Shaheed 131 and 136. You can see the technology that's inside of those drones from Texas Instruments, from Intel, from Advanced Micro Devices. And this is not guesswork. You literally open them up. There's the equivalent of a black box that you can open up, and it's all still there to be preserved and to look at. I think I can't remember whether it's the first or the second drone. This was the Shaheed 136. This gentleman let us in, and we wanted to see for ourselves. And so we went in, and there's the remnants, there's the video, and you literally open up this as a black box, and you can look at the components that are inside. And you see all sorts of markings, quality control pass, American language, different stickers from different companies that are inside of the black box of the drones that are killing these people. So we photographed just this as an example. You'll see inside of these boxes power. You'll see VIN numbers, or in effect ID numbers, that we can trace back. There's letters, TX1, TX2, TX3, TX4, power line communication, LAN means local area networking. Those are all American terms. QC pass, quality control. You've got QA numbers and the like. Inside, as you look, here you can see an analog device chip that I've called out. But again, drone after drone, missile after missile, you can open them up and see what's in there, what's causing this devastation. And it's taking out entire sections of buildings, and it's also killing very nice people. We met the family of Natalia Pepchenko, who was the chief of the dormitory. Her lovely daughter, Tetiana, met with us. She left her mother, Madya. There was a 17-year-old boy named Roman who was studying to be a chef. His parents, Anatoly and Anna, cried like American parents. These are human beings that we have great amounts of things in common with. They are charming people, they're resilient people, they are well educated, and they fight for their freedom. This is Alexander Gorgul, who was 36 years old when his family was there, his wife Yulia, and his son Slavistov. I'm not very good with the names, I apologize. He was critically injured at age 11, but managed to survive. And the number of kids that were literally wiped out over and over again. Adults, Tetiana Romanenko, Yana Maheda, Oksana Yevlev. All of these folks were the victims of this unprovoked, non-military related attack. The second one is even worse, and this is the last one we looked at. It was in the town of Uman, and it was a 9-story apartment complex. And if you go to this particular apartment complex, there were 9-story buildings, one after the other, with no military installation for 15 miles. It was just housing of civilians. And yet Vladimir Putin is aiming with American chips, his missiles, into residential buildings designed to terrorize the people. And this is the video in the aftermath of the Uman apartment tower bombing. And here's some photographs. Here's the aftermath. They try to save lives. In this particular attack, I think 24 people were killed by this missile attack on a 9-story apartment building in Uman, Ukraine. Here's some of the photos. And when we look inside the missile, Texas Instruments, Intel, Advanced Micro Devices, you've got microprocessors inside of the KH-101 from Intel, from Altera, which is an Intel wholly owned company. And so we're not guessing. These kinds of decisions by American technology companies resulted in the death of good people. Galina Berezuk, her son, Yaroslav. We've got a lovely lady by the name of Slitvana Pavlenko, who was 32 years old. Her mother, Olena. We asked her, what is your goal for the lawsuit? And this was her answer.
What is your goal for filing this lawsuit?
Олена, чому ви берете участь в цьому судовому позові? Яка ціль? Ну, тому що так не має бути. Не мають гинути молоді люди, діти взагалі. Because it shouldn't be like this. Young people should not die, and other people also should not die. Кожна людина має право на життя, і я взагалі за мир, за щоб не було цієї, я проти війни. Це треба припинити. His right to life. I am a peaceful person. I'm against the war, and we should stop it. Thank you.
More death. Valentina Troikuk was 60 years old, left her son, literally was just in the wrong place in her apartment. The manager of the apartment was one of the people injured. His name was Sergei Korinnik. Other people were injured that made it out alive, and we talked to a number of them, including kids. And so the bottom line is that very nice people
I'm
are
Jim
asked,
Shaw. I am here.
why
at
are you doing
Vermont,
this?
December 7th, 2025, here with Natalia. Natalia, afternoon. Can you give me your full name?
My full name is Smilanets Natalia Alexeyevna. I was born in Uman and I live in Uman for this time.
What is your goal by joining this case, joining this lawsuit? What is your goal?
I want to help this woman who try to punish that responsible, and I want that this situation will not happen to anyone else. Those responsible of that sin will be punished, and I want in our world we have peace and great life without ruin, without war, without rockets, without everything bad and negative. And I want to help all people in Ukraine to live in peace, and their children and their parents live in a peaceful world with all relatives in good health, strong, and we deserve that. We deserve that, and thank you very much.
Very well spoken, very kind people told us over and over again when we said there was two parts of a lawsuit, to get you compensated and to change corporate activity. Every one of them said, we don't care about the money, we want the missiles to stop. And that's why we're doing this. The bottom line is that over and over again, we met good people with children who are being affected, and we started to see a trend line. And the trend line was these missiles are being aimed where kids are, on purpose. Let me give you another example. Before we get to the kids, there was a food and water warehouse. This was made necessary because the dam that created the water source above the town of Kyiv was taken out. And so in this humanitarian warehouse, they were in effect putting water together in the town of Kyiv. No military use whatsoever. It was just a warehouse, and yet it was attacked to deny the people of Kyiv access to water. And there were people working in there who were killed when this missile came in and struck, and so we got a chance to talk to them. I personally went to each of these 5 sites, photographed them, looked around. Is there a military installation around? Is there anything of possible military application that would justify why these missiles are coming in, where they're coming in? And the answer is no. And these are photographs that I took, and you can see on the right the remnants of the destructive ordnance, and this was an attack by a KH-101 missile. Again, inside of it, technology from Texas Instruments, from Intel, and Advanced Micro Devices. and we can see the people that were killed. Anton Babich was 21 years old, working in this warehouse. His parents, Ihor and Larissa, told us all about it. There's a very nice young lady by the name of Tetiana, who was the mother of a 17-year-old boy, Andrei, who was working in this humanitarian warehouse. This gentleman here, Dmitry, lost his father, Kavitcha. Dmitry actually worked at the warehouse in a different shift and watched his father immediately before this missile came in and knew exactly where he was. Hours later, Dmitry has to leave the first responders to the area in the rubble where he knows his father is, and they find his father's body, in addition to the other people who were with him, including Vladislav Kitsinunfal. And so it's just tragedy after tragedy, but perhaps the one that hits your heartstrings the worst is a missile attack that occurred on July the 8th of 2024 in downtown Kiev at a children's hospital. And that's where it went. We looked around to see whether or not there was any possible military installation nearby, and there was not. Here's the level of destruction that happens when you, in effect, aim a missile at a children's hospital. What possible military application could there be other than to terrorize people? The people that we met with were largely the families of kids that were on kidney dialysis. We're going to talk, and hopefully we have the ability to talk to a doctor here in a second. He's actually in that video right there, and we'll take you through exactly what happened. But the bottom line is, before we get there, the KH-101 missile had Texas Instruments, Intel, and Advanced Micro Devices equipment. There's the hospital complex that we went to visit. It's called Akbandit. And it's just where you take care of babies and children who need medical help. And this is the kind of things we saw. These are pictures that I took in the hospital. Your classic place of hope, where sick kids are being taken care of by good people. And yet this is what happened to those folks. This young lady is a nurse by the name of Victoria. And when she agreed to meet with us, I noticed she was walking with a limp, and we're about to show you why. But the bottom line is that she threw her body between collapsing structure and the children that she was taking care of. Her leg got pinned. Her hip was, in effect, crushed, and they had to keep her in rod fixation devices. She was not able to move for 65 days after this as they tried to reconstruct her hip. While they did a good job, she still walks with a noticeable limp. She was going to be with us today, but she's sick, and so we'll have a second person hopefully here in a second. Lots of disfigurement, lots of lifelong injuries. But again, Victoria said, just send the message, we want these missiles to stop. We went to a different hospital where a doctor by the name of Dr. Olha Babicheva was working, a wonderful lady. And there she is as we're interviewing her. And she was the chief of nephrology at the Children's Hospital. This is what happened to her, her scalp, her leg. This is her in recovery. And before we leave that, do we have her? She's, I think, trying to join us from Ukraine, from Kiev. If we could take down the PowerPoint. There she is. Hi, doctor.
Hi.
Doctor, if you could tell us what happened to you.
Розкажіть, що з вами сталося. 8 липня 24-го року, це був понеділок, я була на роботі, звичайно робочий день. Робочий день у нас починається з 5 хвилинки. І після закінчення 5 хвилинки ми почали працювати, діти підключені на діалізі, гемодіаліз, тобто відділення наше проводить процедуру гемодіалізу.
On the 8th of July 2024, it was Monday, it was just a usual working day. So our every working day starts with a 5-minute briefing. So after that, we get to the children who are connected to the procedure of hemodialysis, which our unit is doing.
І десь приблизно о 11 годині пролунала тривога повітряна. Ми, звичайно, по протоколу спустили дітей в наш цокольний відділ, там, де немає вікон, щоб вони були забезпечені. Але 6 з них в цей час перебували на процедурі гемодіалізу.
Approximately at 11 a.m., we could hear an air raid alarm which started. According to the protocol, we brought the majority of the children downstairs to the underground floor as there were no windows there, but 6 of them were undergoing the procedure of hemodialysis.
Для того, щоб їх спустити, треба завершити процедуру. Цим ми із своїми колегами, з лікарями і зайнялись. Ми спустились донизу і почали завершувати цю процедуру. Далі я вже нічого не пам'ятаю. Пролунав вибух, і я відкрила очі на наступний день у реанімації.
So to finish these procedures, we had together with the doctors to get down to finalize the procedure of hemodialysis for the children. After that, I could hear an explosion and I don't remember anything after that. So I woke up, I came to my senses the next morning.
І 3 місяці я перебувала в лікарнях, реабілітувалась, лікувалась, становилась на ноги. На сьогоднішній день я вже працюю, але наслідки цього удару, звичайно, відчуваю на собі.
So for the 3 months, I had to stay in different hospitals for rehabilitation to, in fact, so that I could get on my legs again. So today I'm working again, but I still feel the consequences of what has happened.
З 22-го року, коли почалась війна, я працювала в лікарні, нікуди не виїжджала. Ми якось адаптувались до цього, і зовсім не було ніяких думок навіть про те, що таке може трапитись в лікарні дитячій. Тобто, щоб ракета влучила безпосередньо у корпус, у здання, у виключно нашого відділення. Тобто було зруйновано таке відчуття, що це було ціленаправлене влучання в дитяче відділення.
Since 2022, when the war, the Great War started, the full-scale invasion started, I was working in the hospital without any idea that I could leave the city or Ukraine. I never thought that it couldn't be safe in the children's hospital. I couldn't even imagine that the missile hit could happen against our unit directly, against our building. So there was an impression that it was the direct targeted hit. Honestly, that was horror.
Doctor, thank you for participating. It was my honor to meet you when we were in Kiev, and thank you for sharing your story with the American people. Okay. She truly is a hero. One of the things that the doctor said is that when the invasion began, a number of her younger colleagues, the younger doctors, wanted to leave Ukraine and go abroad for their safety. But as she pointed out, she and Nurse Victoria had kids that were literally attached to dialysis machines, and if they did not get that on a systematic basis, they would die. And she said, I'm not going to leave my children. One of her colleagues died, and that was a young colleague who stayed with her, who was a young nephrologist who had been in effect, an orphan from the war. And Olga was very close to her, but I commend both Olga and Victoria for what they achieved, and that is not one child that they were taking care of that day died. It took Victoria throwing her body between a child and a falling ceiling, Olga doing the same, protecting those kids as they tried to get them down into the shelter to protect them from the missile that was coming. And so we talked to some of the families. Matvey Dmitrievna was 11 years old. He was on kidney dialysis, and he was saved by those 2 ladies. Solamnia Feminiak was 16 years old, also on kidney dialysis, also saved by Olga and Victoria. And both of them, I'm proud to say, have now gotten their kidney transplant and are on the mend and are on the way back. But this is an example of what Vladimir Putin is doing. He's not only attacking residential areas, he's attacking children. And another example of that is an attack that happened just this year on April the 4th of 2025. This was a missile attack on a residential playground that we visited in Kyiv, pretty close to the front. And there's where it is, kind of in the southeastern side above Odessa. And we felt like it was important to go there. because this literally was the murder of children in Kyiv. And there was no justification for it. Again, no military installation within 10 miles of this apartment cluster. Here's the photographs. These are pictures that I took. And we noticed another thing, and that is that there's all sorts of projectile holes in buildings in 360 degrees. And what we learned is the Russians are attaching what's called a cassette to these missiles, and the cassette detonates and sends shards in 360 directions designed to kill whoever happens to be nearby. And that's exactly what it did. Inside the Iskander-M missile that hit this playground in Kyiv is instruments from Texas Instruments, from Intel, from Advanced Micro Devices, killing a young couple, Alina Kutsenko, who was 15 years old. Her mother, Marta, told us all about it. And her boyfriend, Danilo Nikitsi. These are his parents. They're on top of the tallest mountain in Ukraine, a fine family, good people. And he literally had called his mother minutes before, telling him that he was with his girlfriend and two of his male friends. The four of them were walking across a residential playground when this missile struck. The parents told me about getting one of these, in effect, the equivalent of an Amber Alert. The phone goes off, and before they could even pull it out of their pocket, they heard the sound of the missile's detonation, and they began to call their son with no answer. This young woman, Valentina, she's younger than me, is the grandmother of a 3-year-old boy by the name of Timothy. She had picked him up to take him to that park. It's where little kids go to play on jungle gyms and slides and the like. And they were literally 3 feet apart when the missile went off. Fortunately, his mother, Valeria, was not there. But Valentina, who's 3 feet from Timothy, gets missiles, shrapnel that goes through her neck, causes all sorts of disfigurement to her, but the death of her beloved grandson. And she told me that when you looked at it, you couldn't even tell he was hit. His face was not damaged. His arms were not damaged. It looked like he was okay, but then she lifted up his coat and saw a hole that went through his right lung that led him to bleed out in front of his grandmother. These are the videos that they put on TikTok to give us some idea of what we're looking at here, and that is that we now have a war strategy that is designed to focus on kids. If there's any greater evidence that what the Russians are doing is just outright war crimes, murder, designed to, in effect, kill the resolve of their adversary, the Russians are focused on kids, attacking kids, killing kids, crushing the parents. It's just the saddest thing you've ever seen. And I've got grandkids at this age. This one really hit home. Little Timothy had his whole life ahead of him. It's been snuffed out by the Russian military choice to focus their missiles not at military installations of their adversary, but at their people and at their next generation of kids. So we wanted to share this with you because this was a fine young boy that was loved, a loving family that lost him because of some commander's decision. So that's kind of what we learned. But then the last thing that we learned that I wanted to share with you is that there's a lot of discussion in the media about these talks in Florida. And is this war about to end? I can tell you, every Ukrainian I talk to thinks that this plan is just a sacrilege. It has nothing to do with what they want. They're not going to give up their land because a politician halfway across the world thinks it would be a good idea. And Vladimir, who is a lawyer from Kyiv, who I met, and he asked specifically, can I fly halfway across the world to talk to the people that you're talking to explain to them what we're seeing there. We went to kids' playgrounds. Just in one half of a day, we hit 5 different missile sites that had happened in the week since we've been there. And again, the same trend. You've got attacks into apartment complexes, missiles being detonated exactly in the middle of the playgrounds. And here you can see, right next to kindergarten schools and the like. This is not by mistake. They're doing this on purpose. This is a gentleman that we talked to whose car got wiped out. He had moved from the Eastern Front to the Kiev area to protect his family. His son was killed by a drone attack in March. His car was hit here. We met with him, a fine man, a strong handshake. Had spent 50 years in government service, and it's just been decimated and rendered a crying grandfather that's just lost everything. And these stories just lead you to want to just give him a hug. And my colleague, Jamie Shaw, tried to help him with a month's worth of rent because his story was so devastating. But the important thing is a second example of hitting a kid's playground this week, over and over again. Here's some other examples. And so the bottom line is that the theme that we've adopted for this case is, and it's really true, stop the chips, you stop the war. So if I could, I'd like to introduce my colleague Vladim, who is a lawyer in Kiev. If you would come up and say a few words, and we thank you very much for making the trip over to talk to us.
Thank you so much, Michael. So my name is Vadim Medvedev. I am a partner at Ukrainian law firm Avalum. I would not take too long, but still there are a couple of things I wanted to point out. First one is these cases, these 5 lawsuits that you see. This is just a tip of the iceberg of suffering and terror that Russia inflicts on Ukrainian people. Across all over Ukraine, families go to bed at night not knowing whether they will wake up in the morning. Parents go to work in the morning kissing goodbye to their children, but they do not know for sure if they will be there to get their kids from kindergartens and from schools. And this is true all over Ukraine. This is true in Slavyansk, the place where I grew in, which is now 20 miles from the front line. This is true in Kryvyi Rih, which is 40 miles from the front line. But this is also true in Kiev, which is 200 miles from the front line. And last month, a missile struck a residential building in Ternopil in western Ukraine and killed more than 30 people. I don't even count those injured. Family of one of our associates survived by a mere miracle. And that city is probably 400 miles from the front line. And the question is, why is it so widespread? Why is it all over Ukraine? And there are 2 pillars for Russia's military ability to do that. The first one is financial resources, but the second one is access to technology. Technology is what makes possible for Russia all those attacks hundreds of miles from the front line. For 12 years, Russia is waging war against our country. For 12 years, American government has been introducing various restrictions on both of those pillars. They've been targeting the financial capacity to finance the war, but also, importantly, the government of the United States has been targeting the technological capacity of Russia to build weapons that kill Ukrainians. And throughout all those 12 years, we have seen federal agencies constantly reminding American companies of their duty to be vigilant, of the risks of diversion, of the various ways Russia are getting their hands on American chips, on American technology that was meant to make our lives better, not to kill our friends and neighbors. And that is why this lawsuit is of such paramount importance. It is great honor for our firm to participate in the wonderful team together with Michael and together with Baker Holstetter attorneys. We constantly see that Russia is defying the rules-based order. Russia is putting terror across all over the globe. And we believe that the rule of law should prevail over the rule of force, and that's why we are helping this case with all our efforts and all our abilities, and we thanks a lot to all other team members who participate in that. And we do really look forward for the rule of law to prevail and for justice to be delivered so that chips would not get their ways to kill Ukrainians anymore. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. This gentleman found out that we were in Kiev. I forget which day it was, but literally agreed to meet with us the next day. And we came in long after the workday was over. He opened up his offices and he said, "How can I help?" He's been an invaluable resource from an outstanding firm in Kiev. And then to just give you an idea where his heart is, the next question is, can I get on an airplane and fly halfway across the world? He landed last night. He leaves today because he wanted to tell the American people how important this project is. So we thank him. It is about 10:50, so what we're going to do is we're going to open it up for questions. We have a link with your counterparts in the Fourth Estate in Kiev. We have to be out of this room at 11, so we may take a 5-minute break while we go downstairs to get out of it to continue answering the questions that they have as well. But if we could, if there are any questions anybody here in Washington, D.C. has, I'd like to answer those at this time. Yes, sir.
So by,
Can you give me your name?
Alex Alvey with Newsmax.
Yeah.
So by Russia and Iran, and I believe you also mentioned China as well, but I'll stick to the prior to, by them obtaining these chips, did it make it more affordable to mass produce these weapons? Did it provide these weapons with enhanced capabilities such as navigation, as you pointed out? Or are you saying that absent the procurement of this technology, Russia would not have been able to carry out these strikes at all?
Yeah, what's key to me is Russia's trying to get the technology and doesn't have it. Until recently, all of the drones, the Shahed 131 and 136, were actually physically manufactured in Iran with chips that were shipped in violation of our export controls to Iran and then sent to Russia. That's changed now. In the last year or two, Russia has begun doing its own manufacturing of the Shaheds, but still using American chip technology. The bottom line is that our technology is so much greater and so much more precision than anything available, it would dramatically impede the Russian war machine if the American chip companies could just get their act together and quit this export. Thank you. Anybody else here? Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
And if you could state your name. Thank you.
Oh, sure. I'm Haley with Scripps News.
Hi.
To what degree are the third-party companies identified, and to what degree are the companies aware of the specific third party culpable?
Well, so when we were going through the regulatory history, there's two things that have happened in terms of the regulations getting tighter. First, there are specific munitions lists that are part of the Code of Federal Regulations, so we know what you're allowed to ship and what you're not without a license. If these things are on the chips, you need American government permission. These are all on the munitions list, so this is covered technology. So then the second question is to whom are you selling? And we're still doing the research on this, but the bottom line that, as far as I can tell, is what happened is exactly what happened when we got after Juul, when we figured out that they were addicting 60 million American kids on vaping with no testing. And that is that once they were told by the government, you can't sell this to anybody under 18, what did they do? Did they actually physically put in ways to block that? No, they did the equivalent of like, all you have to do is aver or tell us that you're not 18, and they would ship it to you via a website. Well, all of the information that we have that's been reported by members of the media, including Simon, I believe, is that massive counts of these chips were literally ordered off the internet. Chips.com would be the example, but literally, and you can tell who's ordering them. And so the bottom line is there's just no effort to restrict the distribution of these chips in any way other than to check the box to say I'm not directly selling to a guy named Vladimir Putin. But they know full well that these chips are getting there. And I would just challenge them, do not tell me that inside of that box that I opened up, you couldn't put a global locating device, that you couldn't install it when you shipped it out, that you couldn't put this kind of stuff. We have the technology to be able to show where shards of hair are halfway across the world. We can do that here, but they don't want to. They know that this technology is ending up in Russia. Part of the purpose of this press conference is to embarrass them into doing what is right. Part of the purposes of this litigation is, as I've learned, if you can assemble large numbers of plaintiffs and provide litigation pressure, it's going to get real expensive. And eventually, I would think that these people would rather like to focus their efforts on artificial intelligence and the like, which is a whole nother can of worms with respect to Russia. But if they don't change their practices, we're going to stay on them and make it so expensive they're going to wish they did. Anybody else here in the room? Okay, let's try to open it up to Kiev. Can we do that? We've got a Zoom link. Okay, we have to do that afterwards. Okay, so Slidvana, let me just say, if you're watching the stream and want to ask questions, please use the live chat on the YouTube channel and we'll monitor your questions. If we could take a 10-minute break, we're just going to get out of this room, move downstairs, and then I'll hook up via Zoom and answer all of your questions at that point. But as for the people here in Washington, D.C., thank you for coming. We appreciate the role that the media has played in getting this story out. It's really a stunning example of when media does its job, the word gets out, and I was incredibly impressed by the volume of stories since 2022 that the media has done that literally did the same kind of investigations we did, went to Ukraine, opened up the missiles, opened up the drones, see the American chip technology. They called the American chip companies who either have no comment or say, we're really concerned and we're going to look at that. But then apparently after they look at it, they do what Texas Instruments did and refuse to create any sort of policy designed to mitigate this illegal export of their technology. So if they're not going to do it voluntarily, they can answer to American juries for this conduct. This case is not about what happened in Moscow. This case, just like the opioids case, is about what happened in Texas, what corporate decisions Texas corporations and California corporations chose to use to safeguard the distribution of this technology that they know will kill innocent civilians in Ukraine. And the answer is not acceptable that we choose to do nothing and continue to hit the cash register. That cannot be the answer. And I don't believe that juries will think that that's appropriate corporate conduct. These companies need to understand that their decisions made in Texas and in California, inside the boardrooms, are directly killing innocent civilians in Ukraine. Full stop. So again, thank you for coming, and we'll be on with the folks in Kiev in 10 minutes. If you give us 10 minutes to go downstairs, we'd appreciate it, and then we'll be on with you to answer your questions directly. Thank you.